Hey everyone, it's Nick Marzinski here. It's been a few weeks since I've posted a tutorial, so I thought I'd get back into it. On my blog at trappinglight.com, I wrote a post about a week ago about managing a set of photos from a shoot. In particular, I had about 1,000 or so shots that I took, and I wanted to get that down to a more manageable number as quickly as I could so that I could concentrate on optimizing and editing only those pictures that I thought were really worth it. And Adobe's Photoshop Lightroom program is really great at doing that, so that's what I want to start talking about in these tutorials. For those of you that aren't familiar with Lightroom, it's Adobe's program that's specifically tailored to photographers. Although Photoshop has the word photo in the title, and lots of people think, well, it's used for editing photos, it's also used a lot for graphic design, so it's not completely a photographer's domain. Lightroom, on the other hand, is pretty much only used for photography, and for me, it's my first stop and my last stop for working with my images. So if you're a photographer and you're only using Photoshop or using Photoshop elements, you really should consider adding Lightroom to your arsenal of post-processing tools. Now, to start off, there's a few important things that you need to understand about Lightroom if you're not familiar with it. The first is that it's not just an editor like Photoshop or Photoshop Elements. It's a photographic workflow tool. That means that it allows you to edit your images, but it also catalogs them as well and allows you to put them together into slideshows. It allows you to format them for printing. It allows you to format them for web use. It allows you to export them to social media sites, all that sort of stuff. But the catalog forms the basis of everything that you do in Lightroom. So in order to get all of these benefits that you want from Lightroom, you need to establish a catalog of your images. And that's what I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about today, and Adobe has made it really easy to do that within this program. Now, the second thing that you need to understand about Lightroom is that it's divided into 7 modules. And the modules are all listed right up here in the upper right-hand corner. Okay, to go from one module to another, you just simply click on the one that you want to go to. So right now I've got the library module selected. If I want to go to the develop module, I just click on develop and it brings me right into that develop module. However, for the rest of the tutorial, since I'm going to be talking about importing images and getting them into your catalog, I'm going to stay within the library module because that's where all of that stuff happens. So let's say that you're done with a shoot. You've got a memory card full of images, you stick your card into your computer's card reader, and then you open up Lightroom. Within this library module here, there's an import button that's right here on the lower left-hand side of the screen. And clicking that brings up this import module, which tells me and lets me choose how the images are going to be brought into Lightroom. Working from the left to the right, which is the way that you handle this in this program, the first thing that you see is that Lightroom is telling me where those images are coming from. That's what this source drop down here means, okay? And because I've put a memory card into my card reader, Lightroom's already found that card, and it assumes, wait a second, okay, you've got this card that has images on it. Probably you want to import these images into Lightroom. So it puts it right up here in the devices. It's the very first thing I see, and like I said, Lightroom's already brought it up and it's already loaded up my images. They're all right here. However, if I want to, I can also import images from some of the other places on my hard drive, such as my C drive, my attached hard drive. If I had a CD in there, I'd be able to import from the CD. But in this case, I'm really interested in what's on the card reader, and that's what I want. To the left of that, excuse me, to the right of that rather, Lightroom is showing me all of the images that are on the card, so I can scroll down and scroll up. And all of these images here are what's on the card. This is a bunch of macro shots that I shot in my garden, in my backyard earlier today. Okay, and next to each image you can see these check marks. That's Lightroom's way of telling me, okay, when you decide to actually click import right down here in the lower right-hand corner, all of the images that are checked are going to be imported onto your computer. However, if for some reason I don't want to import an image, let's say that it's really lousy or something like that, I can just simply uncheck the box and the image will go gray, and that's Lightroom's way of telling me, okay, I'm not bringing this image into your catalog, I'm just simply leaving it on the card. Above the images here though, there are some additional options. Since I'm working with a memory card, only the first 2 options, copy as DNG and copy, are able to be selected. Move and add are not. And that highlights one other important thing that's important to understand about Lightroom. It wants to make sure that you can't inadvertently harm your images. So I can't select move here Because I'm working with a memory card, Lightroom doesn't want to allow me to move those images off of the memory card. Instead, I can only copy them. Furthermore, since I've taken these images, since these are RAW files, you can see this little .cr2 next to the file name. That's Canon's proprietary RAW format. Lightroom is also giving me the option of converting the images to a lossless open source digital negative format called DNG if I want to. The great thing about DNG if you're shooting RAW is that, first of all, it's open source, so if Canon or Nikon or Olympus or whoever, whichever camera manufacturer you use, stops supporting your file format, this DNG file format, since it's open source, anybody can work with it. Furthermore, like I said, it's lossless, but it's also smaller, so you're going to actually reduce your file size without reducing any quality by choosing copy as DNG, which is why I like the DNG format and which is why I use it whenever I'm importing into Lightroom. So I'm going to select copy as DNG. So now I've told Lightroom where my images are coming from and which images I want. At that point, I'm going to go over to the right-hand side and I'm going to tell Lightroom where I want my images to go and how I want Lightroom to handle them. Up at the top, it's asking me if I want to build previews of my images. The advantage to building previews is that Lightroom can render images faster on the screen if they've already built the previews. However, the downside to building these previews is that they take up more space on your hard drive. So I usually end up sticking with minimal, but there's a lot of other options that you've got. But for me, minimal does it. I also tell Lightroom to build smart previews. Now, this is something new that came out in Lightroom 5, I believe. So if you're working with an earlier version of Lightroom, you may not have this option. The good thing about smart previews is that it allows me to, if I've saved the image as a smart preview, it allows me to edit this image even if they're not currently accessible on my PC. So if, let's say I've got my images stored on a removable hard drive that's not currently connected to my computer. If I've saved the images as smart previews within Lightroom, I can edit the preview image right within Lightroom, and then later on when I reattach that removable hard drive, Lightroom will automatically update the original image file with my edits. So that's great if you end up having lots of different hard drives with different images. If you build a smart preview when you import an image into Lightroom, you'll always be able to work with that image in Lightroom regardless of whether or not the hard drive that stores the actual image data is connected to your computer. So that's a big plus for someone that has a lot of different drives with a lot of different images on different drives. I'm going to keep that checked. I'm also going to check don't import suspected duplicates. This is great if you end up doing multiple imports off of a memory card. You import a set of images and throw them into one file, then you go back into the import module and have to import another set of images. If you have don't import suspected duplicates checked, all of the images that you've already imported into Lightroom will be grayed out, kind of like they are when I uncheck a box here. Again, that's Lightroom's way of telling me I'm not importing this image. So that's useful, and I usually keep that checked. Below that, I can make a second copy of my image. This is a good way of not only storing an image on your hard drive, but also making an additional copy to, say, an external hard drive. So if I double click on a file location here, it brings up, in my case, since I'm using Windows, it brings up the Windows Explorer. I can go over and I can grab a new, I can specify in my external hard drive where I want these images to be stored. So I'm going to actually set a new folder called Home Pictures, since I took them at home, and I'm going to choose a new folder and call that Macro Photography. And then I'll select that folder. And you can see right here, that's where another copy of my images are going to be stored. Below the file handling options, I've also got file renaming. So I can, if I don't like the fact that that Lightroom is using the native Canon image format, I can also rename my files with dates, with custom names, whatever I want to do. In this case, I'm fine the way that they are, so I'm just going to uncheck the box and not even worry about that anymore. Applying during import is a very useful tool that Lightroom provides that allows you to apply certain keywords, certain metadata, and certain edits to your image, to all of your images as they're imported. This is useful for, let's say, when you always apply some very basic edits to all of the images that you do, because Lightroom can apply all of those edits for you, so then you don't have to go in and go, okay, I know that on every image that I'm going to edit, I'm going to have to adjust this and adjust this. If you can, if you know that that's the case, then you can just simply put it together so that Lightroom will automatically apply that edit, and then you can start off with that edit already in place. And in this case, I have some specific camera calibration and sharpening settings that I use on almost every image. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select that preset, which I call Portrait Sharp and Luminance 50. That's my way of applying a certain develop settings to my images so that I don't have to deal with that later on. It's just simply sharpening and camera calibration stuff. I can also change my image metadata if I want. If you're doing something like using copyrights or wanting to add GPS coordinates or anything like that, this is where you can do that. So if you want to add a copyright to all of your images in the metadata, you can set that up as a preset, and then you'll just select that and be able to have that added to every single one of your images. Finally, you can add keywords, but again, these keywords are added to all of your images that you import. So in this case, since these are all taken with a macro lens, I'm going to call this macro photography and say that as a keyword. Once that's done, the final thing that I have to do is select my destination. Where do I want Lightroom to put these images when it copies them off of my card and puts them onto my computer? In this case, it's really important that you know on the C drive where all of your images are going to be stored, and generally store them in the same place. For me, I've got an all photos folder on my hard drive, which is sorted by year. This is where all of my images go. Every single one of my images that gets brought into Lightroom gets stored in this all photos folder within my C drive, and then it's sorted by year. I have it simply sorted by year. So in this case, I'm going to bring up 2014, and I'm going to choose artwork here actually. And I want that put into a subfolder called macro photography. And the other thing I'm going to do actually, since I thought about it, is I'm going to go back to my second copy here, and I'm going to change this so that this is artwork and macro photography. So I want them stored in the same place in my backup as well as my actual copy that I'm going to be working with. Now, in terms of the second copy here, this is a good, quick way to make a second copy. However, I don't like the way that Lightroom handles a copy, and so I don't consider it a great backup technique. Mostly I use this so that I've got a backup copy of my images between the full backups that I do of my hard drive. Basically, if my hard drive all of a sudden decides to fry on me, I've still got an external version saved. But if you're saving your second copy to your C drive and you're also saving your original copy to your C drive, if something happens to your C drive, then you're kind of stuck. So if you make a second copy, make sure that it's to another hard drive, an external hard drive or something like that. So I've selected everything. I've told it where I want it to go. I've told it that I wanted to add that slight sharpening edit to the images, and I've selected all of my images here. At this point, when I'm at this point, if I know I'm going to be using these import settings again in the future, I can set it up as a preset down here. So let's say that I want to save my current settings as a preset and call it macro photography. And go click create. Now, in the future, the great thing about this is that if I have a preset that I want to use for, say, macro photography, I don't need to go through all of this other stuff that I've already done. I don't need to go to deal with file handling. I don't need to deal with this, to selecting my images and selecting my keywords and my develop settings and all that sort of stuff. All I've got to do is select my import preset of macro photography, and it automatically applies all of these things that I've done, and it will then, all I have to do is just tell it to go off of the card reader, select this, select my destination, and click import. Now that I'm done with everything, I'm going to click import and let Lightroom do its thing. Up at the top here, you can see that it's converting to the digital negative format that I talked about earlier, and it's importing the images. And you can see those coming up here in my library filter. Now, while it's importing the images, I want to talk about what's actually happening here, because it can be a bit confusing. What Lightroom is doing at this point is that it's copying the image to my hard drive. So that image The actual CR2 file, it's a DNG file. It's converting it to DNG, and it's storing that DNG file on my hard drive. That file is not actually stored within Lightroom. However, at the same time, Lightroom is also creating a database that is stored within Lightroom of all of these images. So it's in that database, in that catalog file, it's also creating a smaller build preview because I checked that box, a smart preview, as well as a copy of all of the metadata associated with the image, including edits, including the location of the image if I set a GPS location, including the camera model, the camera settings, what time the image was taken, all that sort of stuff. And all of that information is stored within Lightroom. Okay? Because it's creating that database, this is something that we can use to work with and to make it easy to get to the images that we want, select the images that we want, and then non-destructively edit those images. Because when we're editing the images and when we're selecting the images as part of a collection or as part of a filter system, we're not actually affecting that image data that's stored on our hard drive. We're only affecting the metadata that's stored within the Lightroom catalog. So that's an important distinction to make. The images are stored on your hard drive. They're not stored within Lightroom. However, there is information about your images that is stored within Lightroom, and that's what the part of the import process is designed to do. It's designed to get your images onto your computer as well as build some of that metadata about these images into Lightroom. And that's where I'm going to stop right now. If you're not familiar with Lightroom, Adobe has a 30-day trial offer. You can download it, you can play with it, you can get comfortable with it and see if that's something that you want to do, that you want to work with. If you're part of Adobe's Creative Cloud photography subscription program, in addition to having Photoshop, you also do get Lightroom. So if you're in that program and you're paying the $10 a month, there's no reason for you not to download it. It's free with your subscription and it's always up to date. So I would encourage you to do that if you're part of the photographers program. If you're not and you don't like the idea of subscription pricing, Adobe does offer Lightroom as a standalone product that's not subscription based. It costs about $150 the sticker price, but you can usually find it for less than that. So if you're on the fence about Lightroom, download the trial, play with it, see if it works for you. Otherwise, if you're part of the subscription program, download it because you get it anyway. So that's it for today. Again, my name is Nick Marzinski with TrappingLight.com. Thanks for watching.